Okay. So, hello everyone. This is Naren Suirki, the English gamer once again. And today, this is episode number 6 from IELTS Talks podcast. On IELTS Talks podcast, we have guests from all around the world. We have IELTS trainers, IELTS teacher trainers, and even IELTS candidates with a band score of 7+. Today, we have episode number 6, and in the last episodes, we had guests from different countries, just from the Arab world, but today we have special guest from Australia. He is Jackson Howard. So welcome, Jackson.
Thank you, Nurhan. It's a pleasure to be with you today, and hello to those of you who are watching us live.
Yeah, pleasure is mine, of course. Okay, so first of all, let's introduce Jack. So Jackson Howard has experience teaching English in China, Vietnam, Malaysia, and in his hometown of Sydney, Australia. He has been an IELTS speaking and writing examiner for IDP and British Council. He is currently the manager of the college, Western Sydney University, English language programs. His interests lie in school leadership and personal development. So welcome, Jack, again.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the warm introduction. It's great to be here.
Okay, you're welcome. So this is like a formal introduction. So can you add something else about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think in terms of what you just said, I've loved teaching English, and I've been attracted to that whole profession, including IELTS testing, because I'm interested in the world, and I'm interested in meeting people who have an open mind. And I think languages connect us together like that. And there's so many different, as you would know, being the English gamer, there's so many different directions that we can go in when we have some language to back us up. So for me, yeah, that's what brings me here tonight with you.
Okay, that's great. So today, of course, we're going to talk about some myths around IELTS tests. Okay, and let's say we're talking from a perspective of IELTS examiner. Okay, IELTS speaking and writing examiner, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so let me ask you the first question. So do you think it's possible to predict the topics you'll be asked in the writing and speaking test?
No, it's not possible. And I should say, I think some of these myths we're going to talk about are things that students will commonly ask, and maybe some of your viewers are wondering too, I hope. So that's why we're talking about them. No, it's not possible, right? There are definitely, I think you would know, there are definitely groups like social groups and on whatever platform you use, whether it's Telegram or something else, that will talk on test day about the tests that they received online or face-to-face.
Yeah.
That is one way of, but there are hundreds. There are literally hundreds of writing questions and speaking questions in different parts of the world at different times. So it's very, very hard to predict what test you're going to get. But at the same time, the only thing I would say to people is there are some pretty common themes. Yeah, they're pretty big groups, but there's some pretty common themes that could be related to, say, education. It could be related to pop culture. It could be related to fashion or to cooking, right? So that's one of the challenges of the test is you can predict what you're going to hear, but you need a broad range of vocabulary and knowledge to be able to talk about it all accurately. So no, I don't think you can predict it exactly.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so let me ask you about if we go to the test and we find the examiner with a poker face, and he's not laughing, So do you think the candidate can score higher in the speaking test if he can make the examiner laugh or stuff like that?
Yeah, that's funny you mentioned the poker face, right? Because examiners are trained to not really to not show any bias or not show
Yeah,
anything. But I can't think of anything more unnatural than having a conversation with someone who doesn't respond to you and who doesn't reveal any emotion. So if you're lucky, you get an examiner like me who's a bit more of a human and has a soul. But if you're unlucky, maybe you get a brick wall. No. The question to answer your question, no, you're
yeah,
not going to get a higher mark by making the examiner laugh. They're trained to listen to your language. It's a hard job.
mm, yeah,
It's a hard job listening to 12 people talk for 20 minutes straight and concentrate on every word. But that's what we're trained to do. And so you might have a better time if you make the examiner laugh. It might be more relaxing for you and them, but you're not going to get a better score just because you have a good rapport with the examiner. Don't think, oh, wow, that guy was nice or she was really friendly, I'm going to do well. It's not like that. It's all down to what you can produce and demonstrate as an English speaker. Yeah.
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 So does it mean that if he's not friendly, if he's not smiling, so does it mean, I guess some candidates just think I'm not in the right path, I'm not doing well. So what do you think about that?
Yeah. It's there's nothing. I should say I'm an ex-examiner. So I can talk a bit more freely. There's nothing natural about the IELTS test, sorry to say. So if we put it in the real world, if you met someone who wasn't particularly friendly, who didn't really respond to anything you said, those are common signs that that person isn't interested in you. Right.
Yeah,
But this is not the real world. When you do IELTS, you can't tell. Probably you, as the test taker, whoever you are, you know in your heart if you did well or you did badly, right? But
yeah, that's right.
don't base it on whether the examiner wants to give you a hug at the end or whether the examiner doesn't want to talk to you at all at the end, because yeah. I think there's lots of test takers who have gotten a good surprise after because they thought they did badly, or they got a shock because they
Oh,
thought
yeah.
they did well because of the examiner. It doesn't make a difference at the end of the day.
Okay. So let me ask you a different question. So
Yes.
do you think the candidate can score higher in the speaking test if he is able to give opinions that the examiner agree with?
Yeah, maybe. But like, look, I'd say technically no. Again, so this is something that other students of mine have asked me. Like, I remember I had one student who really wanted to know about the personality of examiners, and
Personality.
and they wanted to see if there was like a general type of person that became an IELTS examiner, so they thought that they could develop their personality in a style that an examiner would respond to or like. And I think that's a bad idea because a lot of test takers tend to be younger people. A lot of examiners tend to be older people. So I think you don't want to model your personality on someone who's not in your demographic. So that's the first thing. But they thought that if they could think like the examiner, then the examiner would like them. Like, so probably not, because again, it's first, if you're not being yourself, that's going to show. You've got to be authentic. That will make your job as a test taker easier because you'll be talking about yourself. But also, like, sometimes examiners don't like the question that they're asking, but they have to ask it. So even if you agree with them, they may not like that answer because they don't like the question. So it's not about that. It's about just being able to demonstrate what your
So they don't
language.
like the question because it's a bit difficult or challenging, or because of what?
Okay. So let's say, yeah, it's challenging. Like a common conversation that I would have with IELTS examiners was, wouldn't it be interesting if we were the test taker? Just once, we'd love to come in and do
Amazing.
that test and see how we would answer questions. Like if I got a question to you for part 2 and you had 1 minute to prepare, and the question was, describe an occasion that you spent that involved water. Now, I remember as an examiner, I just thought that's a really hard question. Like, what if I'm from Laos and I'm from a landlocked country? It's great if you're from Sydney and you're surrounded by water, but, so I didn't like to ask that question because the answers were boring to me. I didn't want to know the answer. And also I thought it would be really hard to answer. And I personally thought it was an unfair question to ask some people. So I didn't want them to have my opinion. I wanted to hear something original and cool, but that was purely out of selfishness.
Okay. Another question is, to score higher in the writing test, should the candidate use a range of idioms?
So this is something that people, I find that no, again, you've got to be authentic. So I find that people of a certain language learning level, they start to develop a confidence and a range of vocabulary, and they start learning about idioms and how to use them. And they think this is how all native speakers talk. And it's true. Do you know what and I think that's great as a learner, and it's true. We do if we're with our friends at a cafe a lot of the time. But if you don't use an idiom appropriately, it's really obvious. It's like, it really stands out as incorrect.
Yeah.
So when people use it in writing, to use an idiom, it sticks out like a sore thumb. Yeah, when they use it as in speaking, it's the same thing, and even harder to pull out when you're speaking and thinking on the fly. So I'd say no, because you're going to use it inaccurately, and that's going to affect your grammatical range and accuracy, or maybe your lexical resource score, because it's going to be an inaccurate sentence or an incorrect use of the language. So probably not, and definitely don't overuse them. Like if you see a training course that says you should use one idiom in every paragraph, I think that's going to be unnatural. My advice to any test taker would be read a range of texts. If you have a good teacher, they're going to give you some academic texts. They're going to give you some example models. They're going to give you some newspaper articles that are written by really good writers. Read them. See how many idioms they use. It's less than you think. So why are you using so many?
Yeah. Okay. But what about speaking? Can we use idioms more?
Yeah. You can. And the best speakers use them all the time, or they use other things. They use slang, or they use contracted words. In Australia, we shorten everything. You could be, you might have some Australian in your blood because you've called me Jack instead of Jackson, right? So if you were in Australia,
I guess in Australia, you say like Jackson, maybe Jackie, like breakfast would be breaky, stuff like that. Everything is going to be like sunglasses, sunny.
Sunnies, selfies. Sunnies and selfies, yeah. That or an O, yeah. Most of my friends would call me Jacko. They'd put an O on the end. Jacko, or avocado just becomes an avo. So many. We're weird people. But I'm getting distracted. But I mean, if an Australian was taking the test, there would be a lot of shortened terms. We'd use gonna, we'd use wanna. These are very natural English expressions. And so that's a positive. And idioms are a positive too, but they make up 5% of your vocabulary in the speaking test. So if you're trying to use it all the time, it's going to be forced. We, as an examiner, the last thing I would say, as an examiner, that sort of language that you're using, we call that risk taking. That's kind of like a band 5.5 to 6, where there's this developing language. We can see that you're at a good level of English, but you're still developing lots, and you're trying to use all this new knowledge, but you're not always using it correctly. And that's going to kind of limit you to probably a band 6 in your lexical resource score. So don't overuse it because it makes you very obvious.
Okay. So now let me ask you about grammatical mistakes. So do you think it's okay to make grammatical mistakes in the speaking test, so long as you speak with a good rate of fluency?
Not if you want a good score. So maybe if you're aiming for like a 5.5 or a 6, yeah, that's fine. But if you're looking to get above that, whether you're speaking your native language or I'm speaking my native language, guess what? We're able to do both. We're able to speak fluently and we're able to accurately form sentences as we go. So no, and I see it all the time. For example, Japanese speakers, very high level of accuracy, stereotypically, very low level of fluency because they're always thinking about, I've got to put this here, I've got to put this here, I've got to put this here. All right, I'll talk to you in 1 minute when you finish your sentence. And then vice versa, I do see a lot of Arabic speakers where there's a lot of similarities between English and Arabic in terms of vowel sounds, in terms of rhythm. Man, they can talk so well, but it's not always accurate. I know what you mean. Your meaning would be clear, stereotypical Arab speaker, but your accuracy would limit you as well. So depends what you're aiming for. If you want that 5.5 or 6, maybe. If you want a 7, you've got some work to do still.
Okay. So let me ask you about speaking part 2. So if you don't speak, or if the candidate doesn't speak for 2 minutes in part 2 speaking, so he will get a worse mark. What do you think about that?
Yeah, okay. What I will say is this is about understanding the test. If you want to take IELTS, and of course, if you want to teach IELTS, you need to understand these little intricacies, these little parts of the test that where there's, how can I say, where there's no clear rule, but the time, so to answer your question, no, you don't need to speak for the full 2 minutes. Actually, as a speaker, you need to speak for 1 minute and 30 seconds. Anything less than that, and the examiner will somehow ask you to continue speaking. But they need, their job is to get you to speak for that minimum minute 30. So no, you don't need to speak for 2 minutes. To do well in part 2, you need to answer the question and you need to give a range of sentence types, you need to give a range of vocabulary, and you need to demonstrate you can use a range of tenses, because often part 2 is about switching between different tenses. So there's something people may not know. You don't need to speak for 2 minutes. You need to speak for 90 seconds minimum.
90 seconds. Okay, so 1 minute and 30 seconds.
Yeah. And if you get to 2 minutes, great. Why not? But anything less than that is okay. I should mention my cat has just joined me on the couch
Okay,
here.
she can join
So
us.
if you do hear some, yeah. So if you do hear some loud purring, I might just put her in another room for 30 seconds.
Okay, it's fine.
I'll
Okay.
kind of ignore her. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So now let me ask you about the like a question that came to lots of people, which is band 9. Can I get band 9 in IELTS test, or is it really difficult? You know, some IELTS trainers say this is really difficult. But what do you think about that as a native English speaker?
Yeah. Of course, it's possible. I want everyone to know that it's possible. Yeah. I mean, you might be able to get it, right? It's something. I don't know what. I don't know what if you've done the test. I don't know if you've got
No,
that
I
score.
didn't. I didn't.
No.
I didn't
So
take the test before Armenia.
you did.
No, I didn't take the test before.
Yeah. So you know, yeah, it's definitely possible. It's different in different countries, maybe. In Australia, I've had a lot of band 8 and band 9 speakers. In Sydney, the tests are it's a multicultural city. We attract a lot of international students and tourists. And so we get a big range of nationalities taking the test. And, most weekends, if I did it, I'd have one band 8 and maybe once a month I'd have a band 9 speaker.
So what do you think
It's
about Arabs? Do you know Arabs who got band 9?
I do know band 8. I do definitely band 8. I definitely do. But I guess what I'm trying to say is band 9 is possible. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not a myth. It's not something that's spoken about. And not like I don't know, some pyramid scheme or something. It exists. But it's hard to get for everyone. It's hard to get for me. It's hard to get and particularly in the writing section, I will say, if you're aiming for that band 8, you can definitely get it. I don't think anyone needs a band 9 normally, but if you were aiming to get a band 9 in writing, you might need some luck, because that is a very subjective, unclear process when it gets to that level of what is a band 8 and band 9 in writing. Speaking, it's pretty clear, but in writing, it's a bit harder. But all the same, reading, listening, writing, speaking, yeah, it's possible.
Yeah.
Yeah. And at the same time, we all know native speakers who have done the test who didn't get that score.
Oh yeah, I know that. But why? Why do you think so?
I think they sometimes, like, if I think about why a native speaker didn't get it, it's because they didn't take the test seriously. Sometimes it's pride or ego or laziness. The pride or the ego says, man, why are you telling me what my English is like? I've been speaking it all my life. There's the laziness that says it's an English test. I'm fine. I don't need to prepare. And they get into the test and they just don't try very hard. So there's nothing for you to assess because they don't give you much of an answer because they don't understand what they're doing. Why do people get a band 9, native speaker or non-native speaker? And really, those terms, I probably will stop using them pretty soon because English is so widespread. But why does anyone get a 9? It's because you've practiced for thousands of hours. Simple and plain. You've practiced and you prepared for the test specifically. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess also the same may happen with Arabic. If I have an Arabic test, so I would say, yeah, okay, this is Arabic, so it's easy. Maybe I will not take it seriously. Just the same as English native speakers.
Yeah. And it's the same thing. You might have Arabic native speakers who take that test and they can't listen for 20 minutes. They lose focus. And before you know it, you've missed 3 answers to that listening test or so on. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So another question I have is, if the candidate doesn't write enough words, or if he goes under the word limit in part 1 or part 2, so will he lose marks?
Yeah, I get asked this question all the time by students is how many words do I need to write in this test or that test? No, you don't lose marks. You used to. If anyone tells you this, they maybe haven't done their writing examiner training in a while. You used to lose marks if you didn't automatically get to a word limit. Now you just get marked on whatever you have written. If there's not enough written, like say you write 125 words for task 1, it's probably not enough. You probably won't have answered the question well enough to score highly. So that's why they recommend 150 words or 250 words for task 2. So you won't automatically lose marks, but you're not giving the examiner enough to mark to get a good score. The opposite is if you wrote 450 words, you also wouldn't lose marks, but you're probably going to struggle to write that much in an hour accurately. So you're going to penalize yourself in a different way.
Okay. So I just have a final question, which is how to be an IELTS examiner. Okay. And what do you think about being an IELTS examiner for somebody who is not a native speaker? Do you think this is possible?
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's very possible. So like you explained, I worked in China. That's where I learned to become an examiner. I learned to become an examiner in China. The one thing everyone knows about China, they have a lot of people. Yeah. There are a lot of Chinese examiners working in IELTS in China. So it's completely possible, but we just also talked about getting a band 8 or a band 9. So if you are not from a native speaking country, then you would need evidence of your language ability. And you would need to do that test or PTE or something like that and score really highly. I think honestly, you probably have lots of advantages because you've had to learn the language in a much more thorough way than I did growing up around it. And the empathy and the language analysis that you have, it tends to be a lot higher than the lazy Westerners that I tended to work with. But it's a good job. It's a great job. If anyone wants to do it, it's personally, it's a lot of fun and you hear a lot of good stories.
Oh, yeah. And what band do we need to be an IELTS examiner? So is it 8 or 9?
I think you need to be an 8 to 8.5.
Overall?
Yeah. Overall.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess I asked you all my questions. So let's go to the audience. So if you have any questions to Jack, please ask. Of course, Jack is an ex-IELTS examiner, so you can ask him as IELTS and an IELTS examiner or an IELTS trainer. Ask whatever you want.
Yeah, ask me anything. Yeah.
Okay, so do we have some questions? Let me ask another question. What challenges do the candidates have when they prepare themselves for the IELTS test?
Well, I think it's in my experience, sometimes it's managing your time. I feel like when I get people requesting lessons for me, often they say, I want to do the test next weekend. I want to do it in 2 weeks' time. And I think, okay, well, you must have a lot of money in the bank because you're going to need to take the test multiple times if that's that's your plan. So I think that's the biggest thing is really understanding what you need to do in each part of the test And then in
Yeah.
each part of the test, there's like task 1 and task 2. And task 1 has 8 questions that you could get. And part 2 and speaking has 3 different parts of the test. And there's different things you need to do in each part of it. So for me, if you're going to do it, give yourself some time. You
Yeah.
need to give yourself a couple of months at least to prepare and to get into that mindset to do the tests, and then probably expect to do the test twice or 3 times, because the first time you're going to be nervous and it's going to be too new for you, and you'll enjoy it. Maybe enjoy is the wrong word, but you'll be more comfortable the second time that you do it than the first time. So you need to give yourself a realistic amount of time to do the test. Unless it's you, I think you're probably ready to do the test.
Oh, really? Thank you. Okay.
You have a lot of knowledge about the test now.
Yeah. Okay, so do you think anyone can get the desired band just from the first trial
Yeah,
if he really prepared well?
yeah. I think people prepare without knowing it too. So people have just been speaking English with their friends and watching it on TV and been going to English classes sometimes that are actually helpful for them. Most don't seem to be, but actually have been going to effective classes throughout high school, for example, and just thought, oh, okay, maybe I'm going to study abroad, or my job says I need this, or my parents said I should get this. So they go do the test and they have a 5 IELTS or they have a 5.5 natural level. You can get that the first time. Maybe to get a 7 the first time, I don't know. But yeah, 5, 6 the first time, it happens. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. Okay, so I guess that's it. So thank you so much, Jack, for being with me today. Thanks a lot. And do you have anything else you would like to add, like a tip or a piece of advice you want to tell candidates about?
Try to relax when you do the test.
Yeah, that's right.
Like what I guess one thing I would say is I never met an examiner that wanted you to fail. Most examiners want to be pleasantly surprised, or they want you to succeed. So go in thinking that, even if they act a bit strange around you, they're just doing their job, but they really do want you to succeed. So take a bit of confidence from that and try to be a bit relaxed when you go in. It's not going to be a negative experience. Yeah. So, and besides that, good luck to all of your viewers and whoever's watching this and their interest in it. Yeah.
Okay, thanks a lot, Jack. Thank you everyone for watching this episode, and wait for us next week. We're having a different guest from Egypt, inshallah. So see you next week, and bye-bye for now.